And good afternoon, party people. Welcome to Office Hours, where you can ask me anything about SQL Server. Follow the instructions up there on the screen as to post your question up there, and then people can upvote and downvote each other's questions, and then we'll go through the ones that are upvoted the most. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it? It's been a while since I've done a live one of these on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. Now we're back in San Diego. We moved back after being in Iceland for about 9 months. Today, I finally feel like my home studio is pretty close to up and running. I filmed a behind the scenes video walking you through how my home studio works. And now I'm vegging out a little bit with a glass of champagne and just checking to make sure everything with the streaming works okay before I go and do a round of free classes this week. Have over 3,000 people signed up. Originally, I was going to limit it to 1,001 people. Ha! That would be terrible. Originally, I was going to limit it to 1,000 people. Mac Genie says, do they speak what in Iceland? Icelandic, as you might guess. But a huge portion of them also speak English as well. Hi, CTI Geek. Good to see y'all. So let's go see what we got here for the first question. So the first question that's the most highly voted comes in from Accidental DBA. Accidental DBA says, hey Brent, do you have a recommended checklist for troubleshooting occasionally slow insert performance? Oh, that's a great idea. Or it's a great question, because I don't have a checklist, but I'm just thinking through it mentally about the things that would be the most important. The three things, it's almost two things when you say occasional. So I'm going to take out the word occasional, and I'm going to say, if you have slow insert performance, what are the three things that I would look at? Number one is too many indexes on a table, forcing SQL Server to grab locks all over the place across all kinds of different tables. The second would be slow transaction log write speeds, because SQL Server has to write to the transaction log to log whatever your changes are as quickly as possible. That would also include writes to always on availability groups, database mirroring, and so forth. And then the third, dagnabbit, I thought of three when I was sitting there. I was like locking, log speed, locking indexes, and log speed. Oh, okay. I don't know if I said, so the first one I said was too many indexes. The second one I said was write log speed. And then the third one would be blocking. So if you have people taking out locks, that will interfere with your insert, update, and delete speed. When you say occasional, though, most likely that means blocking. This multiple people are ending up with lock escalation, or someone's holding on to their transactions too long. So that would really be the first place that I would go look if it's only occasional insert speed problems, is blocking. Next up, Mark asks, how do companies deal with ever-growing databases and the performance issues reading and writing to very large tables? The first thing that I would say is, remember, all throughout history, you've always been facing the largest databases that you've ever seen before. There's never been a time in history, you even go back to the 1960s in computing, there's never been a time where people said, oh, you know what, all our data is really small. It's just that it seems small to you because you're looking in the rear view mirror and going, oh, I remember 5 years ago, my data was so much smaller. But all throughout your career, you're always going to be dealing with the largest data that you've ever worked with. It says, have you heard of ways to split your data, allowing small active data on fast storage while older data resides on cheaper storage? Totally, absolutely. And we discuss that in my training classes, which just so happen to be going on sale here shortly. Starting in November, I run an annual Black Friday sale where all our training is massively discounted, and consulting services like online services and so forth. So you can sign up for an alert when that goes live over at brentozar.com/Black Friday. Now, in terms of the question, Can I teach you how to deal with really large data and sharding it out, partitioning it, archiving it in the span of 60 seconds? No, of course not. That's a serious master level type thing. MacGenie says, oh baby, I have another chance. Now, MacGenie and I were talking before the stream started. MacGenie, if you have a subscription, hold on to yours, and I'll show you why when the deals start. Because probably if you bought last year, it's going to be an even better deal than what you can get now. So good stuff. All right, let's come back over to, where are we? That button there. I switched out all my buttons. I have 2 Stream Decks now, so it's more complicated to coordinate sounds and stream switching and all that. Let's see, next up, we'll talk to Kristófer. I should be taking sips of my champagne here too. Ah, Greg. Oh, Greg, good to see you. Hey, good to see you, man. So Kristófer says, my TempDB files fill the drive they're on about once a month. Currently, they're sitting around 700 gigs combined. I have around 3 terabytes of data on this server. I've been increasing the drive that TempDB sits on, but are there tips in writing SQL not to fill TempDB as much? Yes. Now, I talk about, because the catch is there may be all kinds of things that are using TempDB space, and I go into details on them in my fundamentals of TempDB class. I'm just going to rip through a list of several of them while I'm thinking of it. People creating temp tables, people creating table variables, queries running out of workspace memory, queries needing to sort, say, a terabyte worth of data, and there's not enough RAM to do that sorting. That will catch you. Triggers, building indexes online in TempDB, the version store, and much more. So the first place to start to answer your question would be to figure out what in TempDB is actually using all that much space. And I teach you how to do that in my fundamentals of TempDB class. One trick, if it's queries, use the tool spWhoisActive. spWhoisActive is an open source script from Atom Mechanic, and one of the columns that it outputs, it shows which queries are running right now. One of the columns that it outputs is the number of TempDB allocations that are in use for each of the queries. So if it's a query, you'll be able to figure out which query it is, and then you can go dig into what it is that that query's doing. Is it a spill? Are they building objects in TempDB or so forth? Is it the version store because it's a long-running transaction or what? Next up, Rick asks, hi Brent, I have a table in a client database. I wouldn't, don't say that it's a client database, because sometimes that gets consultants a little upset when they're doing your work for you. I don't care. I mean, I don't mind doing your work. I understand that you're lazy, but just other people. Hi Brent, I have a table in a database with about 1 million rows and a statistic that hasn't been updated since 2018 with a mod counter of over 30 million rows. Auto update stats is enabled. Why would the statistic not be, why wouldn't the statistic be getting updated? The number one reason in there is that the table isn't getting read in a way that would use this statistic. Statistics get updated when the data is read. Sounds kind of backwards, but just because you're making all kinds of changes to the object doesn't mean that SQL Server should go off and update the statistic, because what if you're not done updating yet? What if you're still loading more data into it? And that's probably what's been the case with this table, is that there's a statistic, but it's just not doing you any good because nobody's querying by that column, so SQL Server hasn't felt the need to update that particular statistic. I love how micromanagey you are, how you're getting all over trying to figure out why that stat isn't updated. I mean, I say I love it. It's not like it's hurting you in any way, but if you want to play around with testing to see if that's what the cause is, go run a query that would need the data in that statistic to generate an estimated number of rows. And I bet when you run it, all of a sudden the query is going to go a little bit slow because SQL Server is going to be forced to fire off an update on that statistic. Next up, Dinis asks, hi Brent, if I want to have maximum security in encryption, I need to have a combination of TDE, encrypted connections, and always encrypted for some sensitive columns. Is that correct? I don't do any security work at ever, full stop. If you have security questions, you're really best off hiring a company that specializes in security. For me, the liability just isn't worth it, because as an advisor, I can give you advice and then you can mishear that advice, not take it correctly, or just flat out not do the work. I'll tell you a dirty secret. I've done a lot of consulting engagements over the years where the company has brought me back a year later to go look at what's going on, and the people haven't actually fixed it. So I don't want to have my name attached to security problems when people don't do those kinds of fixes. I mean, you wouldn't believe how dumb people are out there. There are people who can't even read the instructions at the top of the screen. It's unbelievable how bad people are. It's just absolutely amazing. So because of that, I won't do security work. It's a great question. What I would do is I would ask that over at like dba.stackexchange.com. The second party says, these office hours are awesome, but it wouldn't be the same without these amazing views. I will say that the views here are actually pretty good. So this is the view right side out of my balcony. So a lot of the time when I'm not doing anything is I go sit out there on the balcony and I go watch planes land. So tons of fun out there. I enjoy that quite a bit. All right, let's see. Let's come in here to the next one. John James asks, my team wants to start collecting index data and use your def method to send out suggestions to teams. Our company restarts all servers weekly. Does it make sense to collect the data before the server restarts and aggregate it? This way we have more than a week to work with. I wouldn't, because here's the thing. Your application changes and the way that people use it changes. So I don't know that I would go back much more than a week or two in order to analyze index data. I see people who like hoard a whole bunch of data over the past, but then they're looking at how their application used to behave weeks or months ago, and it's just not relevant to how it behaves today. Having said that, sometimes you can have the CEO report, and the CEO report only runs like once a week or once a month. And you might go, well, I don't have metrics about the last time that report ran, so I can't see which indexes it was using or which indexes it wasn't using. For something like that, the metrics collected over time still aren't probably going to be enough, so only one hit against the index isn't going to be significant. Hi, John. Good to see you. So hopefully that makes sense there. I would say if people are going beyond more than a couple of weeks for tuning indexes anyway, I don't know that the old data is really going to help all that much. I do like that you asked. It makes sense that you asked. That's kind of cool. Next up, Mahesh asks, what's the best storage configuration? I have hard drives inserted locally into servers. Do me a favor. My watch doesn't say what year it is. I don't know if I might have accidentally dropped into the past. Hard drives. See, the last thing that I remember, I was in the year 2021. And in the year 2021, the last thing that I remember is I wouldn't put SQL Server data on a magnetic spinning rusty frisbee at howdy, Dimitri. SQL Server licensing is $2,000 per core. Enterprise Edition is $7,000 US per core. I got an old solid state drive in here somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure what year this is, but I got an old solid state drive in here somewhere inside my closet, and this thing's like 2 terabytes. I don't even use this anymore because I have got a larger one off of eBay or off of Amazon. I can't even remember. Oh, there it is. Finally, this is 2 terabytes, and it's a solid state drive, and it's like $100. Don't use hard drives. Don't daisy chain a bunch of turkeys together. You're talking about like RAID 5. Don't daisy chain a bunch of turkeys together and expect them to outperform an eagle. Your phone has solid state storage. In the year 2021, don't be screwing around with hard drives. It just doesn't make any sense given SQL Server's expensive licensing. People are going to drive me to drink. Tim asks, hi, Brent. If I have a bunch of identical servers, I think Tim's on server. Greg says, so should I run my data on SSD on USB? If you have hard drives, this would be an improvement. So Tim is, I believe, in the YouTube chat today too as well. Says, hi, Brent. If I have a bunch of identical servers, in air quotes, but some of them perform very poorly on certain queries while others run the same queries just fine, how can I tell what the difference is between the good and bad servers? Is there a free or inexpensive tool to help with this? My favorite first place to start is SPBlitz with the check server info parameter turned on. SPBlitz check server info equals 1. And then what that does, Bandar, I'd never be brave enough to, I even do that with my laptop, but also I'm an alcoholic. What that does is it lists out all kinds of things like server level configurations, SP configure switches, trace flags, server hardware info, the number of cores, and so forth. That's really the first place that I would start, because I couldn't tell you how many times I have seen people say that a server's identical when in reality it's a different build number. It's got different amounts of CPU cores, different amounts of memory, and different trace flags, you name it. That's really the easiest first place to start. Next up, we have Frank. Frank says, hi, Brent. I have 2 availability groups in a 2-node cluster. In case of a failover, sometimes only one high availability group move to the other node. What do I have to do so that both groups always fail over together to the same node? Frank, I think you're misunderstanding the purpose of having multiple availability groups. If you need to have everything fail over at the same time, that is one availability group. You need to make sure that that's all inside of just one availability group instead of having multiple. Hi, Jedi Mind Gorilla. It doesn't make any sense to have multiples if you want them to fail over all together in the same time. Now, if you have a SQL Server Standard Edition for the poors, SQL Server Standard Edition, then each database has to be in its own always-on availability group. They're called basic availability groups because basic standard edition. I make fun of it, but it's just the dumbest restriction around. Then it's left as an exercise for the reader to make sure that they all fail over simultaneously. I have seen some people do SQL agent jobs that check every 60 seconds or whatever to see where most of the databases live and then fail over the rest to that location. But it's kind of sketchy because you can have database related problems that make one node an unsuitable fit for one of the databases, like corruption on one of the databases or one of the databases. Next up, Tom asks, what are the common roles of responsibility that you've seen between programmers and database administrators? I'm an accidental and only database administrator in a development shop of 24 folks, and our roles have not been defined, so I find it difficult to balance between what I think I should do and what I should really do. Oh, let me show you that. So if I come over here and I fire open a web browser, let's go see if I can actually fire open a web browser, and I search for, let's see here, we'll say Brent Ozar, nope, Chrome, nope. Brent Ozar DBA job duties. And there, I believe this one has, yes, perfect. Okay, good. So this post has a description of what the job duties are for development DBAs, developers, production folks, and so forth. That you said you're the only DBA in a shop, so for you that means that both the development DBA roles and the production DBA roles are all combined into one. Just know that when you're trying to do both of those columns, it's normal to suck at a lot of the job duties, and that's okay. I had to give up trying to do both of those a long time ago. These days, I just really specialize in the third column. It's really hard to be a senior across both of them and be very confident. So that's there. If you search for Brent, those are DBA job duties. That lays out what those differences are. Notice in here that I put in times of how often people do things. This is really, I think, enlightening for a lot of folks, because I know people who go, I do all of that. I'm expected to be great at all of it. Okay, great, buddy. Tell me something. When was the last time you troubleshooted an outage? When was the last time you had a SQL server go down or the service not start? Well, I do it all the time. No, specifically, when was the last time? Give me the date. If you didn't do it today, you're not doing it daily. And people will say, well, but wait a minute. Well, if your SQL servers are going down every day, you have a problem. No, you just have a lot of SQL servers, hundreds or thousands of SQL servers. And that's where it makes sense to start breaking up. Even dozens of SQL servers, it starts to make sense breaking some of those up. All right, let's see what we got next. Next up, Willem asks, hey, in switching from Postgres to SQL Server, was that a big step? Little Bobby Table says, hi Brent, a side question on that. What would you advise to the DBAs that are being tied down by the AD police and things need to be done ASAP? I'm not sure what your question is. Try to rephrase it in a question, just in the form of a question. Because if you're asking me, what would I do if someone wants something done right away? Okay, you got to choose between either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. That's totally up to you. Nesbron asks a question about knowing everything, and he says, well, I've been doing SQL Server in many roles since 1991. At what point will you know everything? Bad news, you don't read the directions. That is why you've been doing the same thing for 30 years, and you haven't had any career growth, Nesbron. Think about that for a while, and maybe it will make more sense to you later. B1 asks, what's the make and model of car on your desk? This one is a 1993 Jaguar XKRS in French Racing Blue, and this is a Porsche 911 Targa, a 991 Targa. And I own the real versions of both of those cars down in the basement, and I say in the basement of my parking garage, so keeps me focused on getting out of here and doing fun stuff. Speaking of which, well, first I'll answer that question. So Willem says, is switching from Postgres to SQL Server a big step? I never had it taken. I don't want it taken. They don't do anything for me. They don't have any soul. Greg says, does the model of the Jag have the recent upgrades? It does have a trunk, and the trunk even opens, but it has the original trunk before the stereo stuff was put in, and I should totally add that in. So back to Willem's question, is switching from Postgres to SQL Server a big difference or a big step? Because I only did the development DBA side, I didn't do the production DBA side. I just did the development DBA side, writing queries, tuning queries, making tables go faster. I can tell you that it's a huge difference. The techniques that you use to make SQL Server fast are not the same techniques that you use in order to make Postgres go fast. I still can't read a Postgres execution plan worth a damn. I suck at that. I really struggle through it because they're not graphically visual. They're online explainers that will move them into visual formats, but I'm just still not very good with them. I don't do very well. Is it hard to make the jump writing queries? No, writing queries is very highly similar, but in the techniques to make them go fast. That's why you'll also never see me, I say never, knock on wood. I mean, you might see me later do it in like 10 or 15 years, but you won't see me write a Postgres performance tuning training class anytime soon because I just am not that guy. I'm not that good. It's hard enough to be good at one database platform, let alone multiples. Mr. Griffith asks, I understand you frown upon in-place upgrades to SQL Server, something about juggling the crown jewels. This is a family broadcast, Mr. Griffith, despite the fact that I'm drinking champagne. Otherwise, I think we would have a lot of good jokes about juggling the crown jewels. It says, does the same thing apply to in-place upgrades for Windows Server? Yeah, absolutely. Because anytime someone wants to make a change to something production related, I have a very simple question. What's your plan B? What happens when it goes wrong? And if the answer is things like revert to a snapshot, I'm like, okay, no. You go build a new server. Go build a new server and do whatever things that you want to do to it. Because I want to make the outage downtime as short as possible. And I want to know when things go wrong that I don't have a huge rollback process where I'm having to jump back to a snapshot and then try change something. I may drive to the store and get champagne now. Come on now. Why would you not have champagne at home? And I'm not even like a champagne, turn up my nose at, or a snob at low-end champagne stuff. Oh, Mom's here. Oh, hey, my mom's here. Hey, howdy, Mom. Mom usually likes to tell everyone that she taught me how to read, which is true. Is absolutely true. And yes, that really is my mother. Next up, Jaden says, my company's using the SQL Server and they want to save the database data into JSON. Why do they want to do it and what changes for you? What I would just say is, if they want to store JSON data somewhere, why not use a database that's really targeted at stuff like that? A key value or a document database that's less expensive, it's easier to scale out sideways. I don't understand why we would really spend $2,000 a CPU core on SQL Server to store JSON data inside of there. What changes for you? Not a whole lot, other than it's really hard to make JSON queries fast in SQL Server. It's not like we have JSON indexes. There are tricks you can do around persisted computed columns, but they're very rigid. They're not flexible at all. El Paso, old El Paso. I love your salsa. I'm just saying that. I don't really love your salsa. Any salsa that comes from a bottle, I have a hard time with. I'm not a champagne snob. I am a salsa snob. If it's not fresh made, I have a really hard time with it. DBA Girl asks, hi Brent, our company creates indexes for all foreign keys on a table. That's totally fine. That's a good start. Like a lot of shops, will do that by default. It's just that you need to tweak your strategy as the number of columns grows. She says, for some tables, though, this can create 20 or more indexes. How do you balance the recommendation of indexing those columns with the performance degradation of having too many indexes on a table? Well, right, but that's not SQL Server, right, Dan? This is a SQL Server webcast. You might have seen the instructions on Ask Me Anything about SQL Server. Dan, can you read, Dan? Dan, do you hear me? No, we probably lost Dan. So the thing that concerns me there is that over 20 foreign keys on one table, what's going to happen every time that you insert a row or delete a row, SQL Server is going to have to go check on 20 other different tables trying to do all that referential integrity work. That can end up slowing you down under high concurrency. And for me, what I would say by high concurrency would be 1,000 inserts per second or more. If you're under 1,000 inserts per second, this may not be that big of a deal. And also, if you're under 1,000 inserts per second, you may not be running into blocking problems. But as you start to run into blocking problems, because SQL Server has to lock all those different rows in all those different tables, then that's where companies start to peel out the foreign key relationships. They start to say, well, look, maybe we don't actually have to enforce foreign key relationships inside the database. Maybe the application's strong enough that it won't put in bogus data as is. Greg says, does the foreign key referential integrity kick in for every column in an update, or is it just the columns that change? It's just the columns that change, but if you pass in the same data, if you pass in update set child ID to child ID, SQL Server still goes and checks. If it's in the update list of columns, even if you pass in the same value, SQL Server is going to at least still go and have to check against those. Paul White has a great series about the impact of non-updating updates. But then if you go a layer deeper and you look at the execution plans, there will be spidered out joins to all kinds of other tables as well. All right, next up, Bandar asks, I came across a weird situation where queries against one table is way slower when ran from the readable secondary. It's fixed after rebuilding the primary index on the primary. My question is, why isn't it slow on the primary? Execution plans looked identical. So let me zoom out a little and say, what do I do when when a query on one server is fast and a query on another server is slow? You nailed it when you said first check the execution plan. The second level in would be to look at wait stats on the queries, because it's possible that the servers have different hardware, they have different power settings, etc. There are all kinds of things that could be different between those servers. Wait stats are a great place to start. Tony, read the instructions up there on the screen. Next, let's see here. That one we've already shown, so I can skip that one. Oh, Marcus. Oh, wow. Marcus asks, hi, Brent. Is it possible to see which data is on an 8K page so we can say what data was hit by corruption? Yes. There's a command called dbcc page. dbcc page lets you pass in a file number and a page number, and it shows you the raw contents of the page. This is useful. I use that term really loosely. This is useful when you want to see the exact contents of a page to know what was corrupt. You don't get the luxury of a list of rows and columns on there. All you get is the raw contents of that page. Howdy, good to see you. Especially in the afternoons, that totally helps. If you want to learn more about the techniques of how you use it, Google for Steve Stedman, S-T-E-D-M-A-N, Steve Stedman Database Corruption Challenge. And it was, I think, like 8 or 10 weeks long, and he gave you a gives you a database for every week. It was like one whole week in a row, or several weeks in a row. Every week he gives you a database, and then you go and figure out how you're going to recover from corruption. What I would do is I would read the challenge and then try to solve it yourself. Then after you give up on trying to solve it, or you succeed, then go read the answers for each week, and you'll see how those of us who played along with it, how we solve the problem, and how we use tools like dbcc page in order to solve that problem. I don't want to make it sound like I do that on a regular basis. I won the first week of that challenge because I just happened to be sitting next to the computer on the weekend when Steve's first week came in. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I absolutely have to do that. Hey, DJ Khaled, good to see you. But I don't do that on a regular basis. I just find it a fun thought exercise. I actually don't take consulting for clients with corrupt data. I send them off to Microsoft or other partner firms that I know, like Steve's for that matter. Mark says, we have some huge table. Mark, I get that you're trying to show off. I get that you really want everyone to think that you have big data, but let's be honest, it's really only 4 or 5 inches long. It says, after huge inserts into the table, the query plan takes an index scan rather than a seek. Updatestat might fix that table, but it breaks other queries. I can't change the query because the tool handles that. Do you have any idea why that happens? Yes. And I cover it over in... Tim laughs about the on-screen comment pointing. I cover it over in my Fundamentals of Parameter Sniffing class. In my Fundamentals of Parameter Sniffing class, I explain how SQL Server builds different execution plans based on the values in your queries. It's going to be on sale next month during my annual Black Friday sales during November. And you can sign up for notifications about that over at brentozar.com/Black Friday, where my courses are usually between like 50 to 75% off. The Fundamentals of Parameter Sniffing class is a one-day class that teaches you what's happening And then the mastering parameter sniffing class is a 3-day long class that teaches you all kinds of different ways to fix it and identify when it's happening more quickly. So that you can sign up for notifications about that over at brentozar.com/Black Friday. So now back over to our regularly scheduled. There we go. Little Bobby Tables next asks, "Hi Brent, when I'm optimizing queries using hints and options, I am hitting bitmap creations that are really slow. What voodoo optimization technique should I employ to avoid this slow bitmap creation? Can you show us a quick example, please?" No, I don't have a demo. You're welcome, Julian. I don't have a demo off the top of my head that I can use for bitmap creation. The place where I would go is SQLServerFast.com. SQLServerFast.com is a site run by Hugo Cornelis. Man, I can't believe I don't remember where Hugo's based out of. He's not based out of, it's somewhere in Scandinavia. I can't remember if it's Finland or Sweden or where it is. But Hugo Cornelis just recently, in the last couple months or so, had a series of blog posts about bitmaps. You can also go to, at the top of SQL Server Fast, you can go to his execution plan reference. I'm pointing as if it's right up there. The execution plan reference, and then in there hit the bitmap, and he'll link you to the blog posts on bitmaps. He also has a series of training classes on execution plan operators. I don't remember if he's got one handy on bitmap or not. I don't teach it in my classes. It's one of those where, oh, he is Dutch. Oh, Andre. Oh, Andre. Good to see you. Another excellent person. Listen, I don't cheer for all of you, but usually it's when I don't cheer, it's because I haven't met you in person. Although I think I cheered for Greg, and I don't think I've met Greg in person yet. I don't think I have. So anyway, I don't cover it inside my training classes because usually there's not a lot you can do without rewriting the query from scratch. But Hugo, oh wow, dev intersections, holy smokes, wow, that's amazing. It's been a while since then. Jedi Mind Gorilla. Jedi Mind Gorilla. Okay. Yeah, you're not a bad person. Oh, Farshid asks, "Hi Brent, have you ever had a customer which you tried to convince them to switch from Oracle to SQL Server? If yes, how did you do that?" No, so companies with Oracle's $47,000 a core sticker price. Companies who can afford Oracle, they don't hire some guy who sits around drinking in his home office on a webcam. They can afford real database professionals, not some lush who just sits around goofing off on Sundays. And I joke, but to some extent that's true. People who run Oracle, they tend to use large enterprisey consulting shops, spend a lot of money. They wouldn't hire some yo-yo to go teach them how to move from one database to another. I actually have a lot of respect for Oracle. I actually wouldn't say that. Oracle has things like result caching that you can turn on where it'll cache query results. It has just all kinds of amazing stuff. Every time I read Oracle documentation, I'm like, wow, that's why it costs $47,000 a core. It's really good. Exactly, Adam nails it. It's a really good database. It's just really, really expensive. Now, I have had clients who've come to me and said, "Hey, we're thinking about moving from Oracle to SQL Server. Can you help?" And I'm like, "Are you out of your mind? Because you have to rewrite all your code." In theory, people will say, "Oh, you don't have to rewrite all of it if it's all compatible." No, dude, you're going to have to rewrite big chunks of it. And usually when you do the math on doing those kinds of conversions, it's not really cost effective. It actually makes sense to continue giving Oracle your firstborn children because or do you want to trade 10 cores? That's true. But Oracle's, it's really good for a reason. And if you've got applications, or it's expensive for a reason because it's really good. And if you've got a working application, your entire company relies on it, you're taking a risk if you move it to another database platform. And between the high cost of rewriting stuff and the length of time it takes to rewrite stuff, I just don't know that it's really worth the risk. Next up, Michael from Denmark asks, sometimes the query text in Blitz cache is truncated and it's not the full text in the query plan. Is it possible to get the server to save the full query text? No. SQL Server's plan cache stores a small portion of the entire plan. I forget what the max T-SQL size you can run is, if it's like 40 megabytes or 100 megabytes. You wouldn't actually want to cache that entire statement inside the plan cache, because then you just wouldn't be able to cache anything but those execution plans. So I see where you're going, but no, what you might want to do instead if you need it is fire up an extended event session that captures the queries that you're looking for, but don't go proactively catching all kinds of queries, because the amount of text that you would save would be just way too large. Next up, Jay asks, is change data capture a viable strategy to publish event data to external systems instead of publishing from the application code? Anytime that you have SQL Server audit itself, you're going to slow down SQL Server. And with things like change data capture and change tracking, you're also forcing SQL Server to keep some history, which will also grow the size of your database backups. So is it a viable strategy? Yes, but there's a cost to it. I would usually rather say, what is it that we need to track in terms of a change trail, and how can we get the application to store that instead? But, of course, I'm a SQL Server performance guy, and the slower SQL Server gets, the more money I make. So I can't complain too much when people want to slow down SQL Server, because it pays for my champagne. And then we'll do one more question. Oleg asks, hi Brent, I'm halfway through watching all your training classes, and you're teaching us to tune for checking estimates if you have to tune one query, one where SQL Server estimates and another where SQL Server underestimates the number of rows. Which one would you prefer to tune and which to leave as is? Well, Oleg, go ahead and finish all the way through the training classes, and what you'll see when you get to mastering server tuning, and I'm not saying you're not allowed to ask questions, you absolutely are, but as you get to the final course, mastering server tuning, I teach you how to assess the SQL Server's bottlenecks as a whole. Look at, am I CPU bottlenecked, am I memory bottlenecked, am I storage bottlenecked, lock bottlenecked, and so forth. And then I teach you how to find and prioritize the queries that are causing that bottleneck. So I'll finish with that. That is going to be on sale, of course, for the rest of you who haven't signed in. This, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. This upcoming year will be the last year that I run the live class season pass. I am getting old, and I don't want to show up at a specific date and time in front of the computer anymore. I would like to be drunk all the time. That's not entirely true. But so this will be the last year that you can buy the live class season pass, because when you have a live class season pass, I want to make sure to teach a class every single month so that you can drop in anytime and go get your learn on. After October 2022, I'm not going to be teaching a live class every month anymore. Instead, it's going to be more of a special occasion when I go hop in and teach a brand new class. Oh, you too, Jedi Mind Gorilla, you too as well. So this will be the last year that you can go buy a live class season pass if you want to just drop in whenever you want and learn from me on how to master SQL Server. After that, it'll be much more common for me to just drop classes out as recordings, and then every now and then I'll do a live class. So if you kind of had it in your bucket list as this is something that I want to achieve at some point, buckle up. It's going to be the last year. Go and get your learn on. So that will be a wrap for this office hours. I can't believe how fast these go. At 10 till the hour when we went live, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make myself a note. At 20 minutes after the hour, I'm going to quit because I don't want to do more than 30 minutes because these videos can be kind of long to watch. It's been 45 minutes now, but it's just so much fun hanging out and talking to y'all. I always really enjoy it. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to go off and go veg out on the balcony. It's an absolutely gorgeous day here in San Francisco. Oh, Tony, good to see you again as well. So it's a gorgeous day. San Francisco, why would I even say that? I have a friend in San Francisco. I just happened to be typing about that earlier. But a gorgeous day here in San Diego, and I will see y'all later. Adios.